where a lot of them are saying, just what's the lowest interest rate? What's the lowest interest rate? Because that's the number one question, because as though that is the number one factor that determines whether it's the right mortgage for them. When oftentimes it comes down is, what's your situation? What do you want? Or who do you want to be working with?
We're here to help people when they say, yes, I want to buy a home, and dig in deeper to the questions that they don't even know that they have. And I think that's the crux of it, is really making sure that you're solvent on your strategy, working with people that maybe have done what you're trying to do, and finding out the questions you don't even know you have yet.
Things aren't maybe as bad as they might seem. Who's buying for someone who's looking for that, so the lower level entry point for as far as price? What are the factors that are going to go into that? Is it going to be the location? What are things that they can watch out for so they can help make that right decision? Thank you so much for coming out. For those of you who are here for the first time home buyers event, super fun night, super hot outside, but you braved the weather. I feel like normally as a Canadian, we apologize for the cold weather. Like, you braved the weather to come out, but now it's kind of the inverse. But I think I know most of you guys here, but my name is Zach Havens, and I'm a mortgage agent here in the area. And I'm here tonight with Justin Konikow, owner, realtor of Prime Brokerage, and runs an amazing crew there. So we're just gonna chat about first-time home buyers, what that looks like in today's day and age. Things are kind of crazy out there. There's a lot of stuff on the news. Don't really know what to believe. Or if you're in a place where you're trying to figure out how to get in, what does that look like? What are some best practices? And so that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Awesome. So Justin, we're just going to keep it super casual.
Sure.
Let me move this out of the way here. So I've just got some questions for you about what this looks like. And so at the very end as well, we're going to have Q&A, so you guys can ask any questions that you might have, specific situations, that sort of thing. But yeah, this is it. So Justin, how's it going?
It's going really good.
Yeah.
And if we don't have, I guess, weather or politics to complain about, what do we complain about?
Fair point. Fair point. This is it. So you're a real estate agent. Mm-hmm. You own a brokerage. You see a lot of real estate. You've done it for a long time, many years, a lot of experience. The market's crazy. Mm-hmm. Okay. If you look at a headline, you'll see that the rates are high. See that housing prices are high.
For sure.
It's never been harder for people to get into the market. How do you respond to that? How can anyone buy a house in this market, especially if it's their first time? What would you say to them?
I think from a market perspective, it actually has more to do with sentiment than it does with the rates, being quite honest with you. Now, albeit the average price of a home is still very high, right? Like, we're talking north of $700,000. And I actually used to live just on the other side of those townhomes. We bought that house for $330,000. My salary at the time was probably 40 grand a year. I was managing Joe Cool's. I was bartending. So like, maybe I was making closer to 60-ish, but that was a reasonable house price that I could purchase. And interest rates were around what they are now when we purchased, right? Mm-hmm. And I think people keep talking about how it's a high interest rate environment. Like, we're in the fives. That's not a high interest rate environment. I think we're in a very high priced home environment. And I think that the sentiment is such that people feel like they don't have clear direction from the government leadership as to where they're going with monetary policy. I think people are concerned about the economic situation on the planet, let alone Canada. Yeah. And a lot of the political climate leaves people feeling very uncertain. So I can tell you, though, boots on the ground, if you look at the sales stats, we're still trading real estate at a very high level. It just depends on what type of real estate it is and where it is, because we can talk from macro perspectives about what's happening across Canada. We can talk about the Bank of Canada dropping interest rates a quarter point, but what's happening in your backyard, because what's happening in, say, residential resale is very different than a luxury resale property, which is very different than a new construction property. All three of those markets are vastly different, let alone if we're talking about London versus St. Thomas versus, say, Grand Bend, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So if things aren't maybe as bad as they might seem, who's buying for someone who's looking for that, so the lower level entry point for as far as price? What are the factors that are going to go into that? Is it going to be the location? What are things that they can watch out for so they can help make that right decision?
So I think a lot of people that have nest eggs are unfortunately forced into, say, the rental market to begin with, unless they've got some support or the ability to take equity from places and put it into an asset. And what I mean by that is, back when I purchased that home, it was me and my wife, and we had made the purchase based on our savings and able to buy $330,000. A lot of people that are buying now are leaning on family, they're leaning on investments, they're leaning on co-signers, because the banks are just so tight from a policy perspective. Yeah. I think the assets they're buying are not single family detached homes, right? And again, talking about that house that I bought for $330,000, I didn't talk about 65 Riverside that was $88,000 that nobody here would probably ever want to live in, but I lived in it and renovated it until I was able to buy the next one for 150 and then sell that one and buy the next one from up there. So if you talk about that product point, and I was a new buyer today, I might start at a condo at 363 Coburn downtown, which downtown has its struggles in London. And I was a big part of the downtown improvement programs. And right now it's on sale. So I could get a condo there in the $200,000 to $250,000 range, and then maybe renovate it, add some equity to it, and then I can get great rental rates for it. So then I could buy myself into a bigger product, keep that as an investment property, do that 2 or 3 times. All of a sudden, I've owned 3 or 4 properties, and I have the equity to sell them and get into a $900,000 house. Yep. Is that going to happen in 2 years? No. But it's not easy, and it never was supposed to be, right? Like when I renovated 65 Riverside Drive, I was learning to drywall. We had a tenant walk out on us. We tried to go to court and get the money back. We didn't. I lost a lot of money, a lot of sleep, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears doing that, but it made me resilient. I think one of the problems we have in Canadian real estate is this feeling that we should just be able to hand somebody a 2,000 square foot detached home in the best neighborhood in London when the economics of that simply don't work. So instead of just complaining about that, how do we find solutions? I think we look for emerging markets, new solutions to new products. And so if somebody does want shiny and new, I do think that's coming. And builders are going to be scrapping building $900,000, 2,000 square foot detached homes. And you're going to see project after project come online that are attached semis in satellite markets like Lucan and all these different places for 500 to 600 grand. And I think people just need to accept the fact that they're not going to turn around initially and buy, say, in the best neighborhood for that single family detached, that maybe they have to live in Lucan for a little bit, or Kilworth, Kamoka, or one of these markets to get the leg up in a competitive marketplace.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, and that's what you see a lot of times too, is people will get into the market at a lower price property. Because I remember when my wife and we bought our first place, it was small, it was tiny, there were a million things wrong with it, but we got in, and then we moved to another place a few years later, and that allowed us to leg up and get to the next place, and we had more equity, and it's a tool, right? It's a stepping stone to go from one place to another place. And for a lot of people, though, they're seeing the challenge of kind of getting into that first place. But I love what you're saying as far as being intentional about the location, maybe adjusting your expectations of what your home is going to be like, or a dream home. I think a lot of people talk about a dream home as though it's like this thing, and you want it to be perfect right off the get, where for a lot of younger purchasers, you need to just kind of get what you can get into the market, get started, and then build from there, and look at it more from like a strategic perspective. And it's hard because people put their hearts into their home. It's their home, right? It's not just a financial exchange. So trying to navigate that can be a challenge for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think to that point, the celebritization of real estate, I think, is a big problem, both of the real estate agents themselves, but also the properties, right? Like everybody sees on HGTV these properties that are beyond some things that I even have in my house, right? And I think the level of expectation, I think there needs to be an adjustment in terms of where's there a value investment versus a lifestyle investment, where I would even argue that your home isn't necessarily an investment. There's an opportunity cost to having a house, stable environment, good place to raise your kids. And if you can pay off your entire mortgage, I mean, the ability to do that, I think, is something that we've lost over the last 15 years because we didn't live in a saving economy. Interest rates were so low that if your money sat in the bank, you had to deploy it. Otherwise, you were losing money because of inflation. Now it's going back. And I'm telling people, like, start getting conservative about saving your money, putting it in the bank, paying off your mortgage, and going back to how we were raised, where my parents saved and wanted to pay off their mortgage, right? On the valuation side, though, I got a call today, for example. A lady called me, and she called me on one of our listings in Grand Bend. Riverfront property, 80-foot dock, beautiful home, $1.5 million. And she's like, I want a cottage. And she's like, it needs to be under $1 million. And I said to her, okay, what matters to you? Do you want access to like downtown, walkability? She goes, no, I actually really want something peaceful. I want to walk to the beach. I said, okay. And she's like, I want shiny and new. And she's in the real estate industry. She has a very high-end real estate magazine in Muskoka, Toronto, and she's just finding Grand Bend. I said to her, here's an Instagram account I'm going to send you. It's called Priolo Living. You can look it up. And it was done by 2 clients of mine that I met through Scott McGilvery. And I've worked with Scott for 10 years. And my job with Scott is to find underperforming properties, bring them to investors, and show them what they could be worth if they renovated them. This property was bought by 2 of Scott's investors, $900,000, in an area that is very peaceful and quiet, but it was a complete renovation job. They brought in contractors. They spent probably $75,000. Let's call it $1 million or $100,000 for round numbers. And let's say they were into the property for $1 million. They bought it when nobody was buying during the pandemic, because that same property at the peak would have been 1.2 to 1.3. So they're into it for $1 million. They refinance it at the bank. Bank gives them an extra $300,000 back. So they put in $100,000 essentially, and they got $200,000 back. Right? So their entire renovation was paid off, and they had an extra $100,000, and that property today is probably worth 1.5. So they made about $500,000 on that asset because they put in the work to make it worth what the other houses in the neighborhood were worth. And I think everybody hears the success stories in real estate, yet they don't want to do the work to find the deals. And regardless of what the market's doing, if it's up or if it's down, when the market was ripping and super competitive, we were still finding deals. We just had to be very conservative on our estimates and work really hard to determine after renovated value and not get caught up in bidding wars. Now that the market is depressed, we have to look at 10 times the inventory, but the deals are still there. You just have to know how to find them, right?
Gotcha. So as for someone who's looking for those deals, someone who's going out, realtor.ca, is that where you start, or where's the best place to find those deals?
So, I mean, everybody's got access to the data that agents used to have 20 years ago. So here's a fun little synopsis for you. The value of an agent 50 years ago was giving you a little book of what's for sale. You had to call that guy to get the book. That was his value. The value of an agent for the last 15, 20 years was sending you access to a portal. They set up a Polygon search, you find your own house, you call them, they open the door, they get paid. Now, everybody has sold data, so they can find, or even they would tell you what the house sold for next door. That was kind of the value of an agent. Now, all of you have access to sold data immediately. The value of an agent is interpreting what the sold data means, because I don't care if you know what your neighbor's house sold for. Do you know how good the agent was that was selling the house? Do you know how good the agent was that did the buyer offer? Do you know if it was a distress sale? Was there a divorce going on? Was there something that happened during the inspection where they found mold in the walls and it was $50,000 less than your house should actually be worth? So I think where people need to start is strategically, what are you looking to do? I do think you should form a power team, which would be your actual lender before your agent even. Talk to somebody about your money and what capacity you have to actually purchase before you just start looking. Because a lot of people will go out shopping, looking at stuff that looks really nice, and then get depressed when they realize they can't buy it, and then they got to go look at other stuff. Then I do think you want to find somebody that is specific to the asset you're looking at. They should understand the territory or have a team that covers that territory. They should have experience in case studies to actually show you how they can bring value. And they should be able to explain strategy. They shouldn't show you a slide deck on the biggest brokerage that they work for and show you all these big numbers that aren't their numbers or sales tactics. If you feel like you're being sold, you probably are. Find somebody with expertise and leverage, and then find a good lawyer. A lot of people wait until the last minute to get a lawyer. Getting a bad lawyer might be the most expensive mistake you've ever made. And I say that for a reason. I know you're going to talk about law in a minute. Case in point, Nolan and I were working on a file, and one of my longest term friends, we sent him 2 lawyer referrals. Didn't take either of them. They wanted to find somebody super cheap. We found them a great house. Thank God we did the final walkthrough. We found that there was actually a slight mold issue in the bathroom. They're like, oh no, we sprayed it off. I'm like, yeah, well, we're still going to get somebody to look at that. Sure enough, we find out there's an ongoing water leak. It's a firm deal. Closing's coming in August. Their lawyer recommendation was, oh, just take an abatement on closing. I called the guy right away. I'm like, dude, that is the worst advice I've ever seen in my life. Because if you give that seller $900,000, you take $1,500 off the price, and then you close and you open up that wall, you might find a $30,000 repair. I said, absolutely, you're not doing that. You're going to make them fix it before the final walkthrough, provide documents to us that they had it done and remedied by a professional, or you're not closing. And I'm not even the lawyer. It's not my job to say that, right? So case in point, you want to work with people who know what they're doing. Just like if I was learning to run again, I would come to Backroads Brews and Shoes, and I'd be like, hey man, but seriously, I had a hip replacement 2 years ago. I don't really know how to run again. If I was going to do that, I would probably talk to somebody who knew how to do it, fix my gate, get around people that have a passion for the thing that you're looking to accomplish. On the investment side, I'm going down a wormhole. You can go into investment groups. You can find other investors that are doing it to a high level. Be very careful. In that world, there are a lot of people that are going to want your money. They're going to try and sell you something. They're going to try and get you into a coaching program. The people that are doing it at the highest levels keep their circles kind of small. So you want to get into environments where you get access to people like that with quality referrals, not just something that you saw on TikTok or Instagram with a fake life coach that is a real estate investor, because lots of those guys are getting sued out the yin yang over the last couple of years from the market crashing. So
yeah, and it's funny to see all the people that were like big online, saying a lot of stuff, and now they're just gone.
Ghosts.
Gone. You never hear about them. It's crazy.
Yeah, there was wasn't there a TV star? Like a white TV star or something in Hamilton,
really?
all over the news right now. Yeah, huge deal. Mortgage fraud and investor frauds. There was one in Grand Bend, $54.2 million fraud during that time. So yeah, you got to be careful for sure.
Wild. Well, I think you hit it on the head, man, because it's like there's so much data. There's so much information, and this is one of the blessings of our time, but also one of the curses of our time, because we have access to all this data that we couldn't see before, and we needed to talk to professionals about it. Now we can see it all, and it's easy for a lot of people to feel like they're the expert. And sure, you get a lot of information, but it's the value of interpreting that information. What does that look like for you? How does that apply to your specific situation? And you can make really big decisions, or really poor decisions, really big disasters, unless you're talking to the right people who have your best interests at heart. And which is why you're absolutely right. The power trio there between the real estate agent, mortgage agent, and the lawyer go a long way in helping you make the right decision, whether it's an investment, whether it's a first-time house, whatever that might be. Talk to someone who knows in the same way that you talk to a doctor. You know, WebMD is awesome, but at some point, it's a good idea before you cut your hip open to talk to a doctor who knows what they're doing, right?
Well, what's wild is talking about the hip surgery. Case in point, thank God I have my wife. The brokerage would be shut down because Nico knows I'm chaos. I am pure chaos. Shannon's very organized. She's the broker of record. When I actually got told, I was 33 when I got diagnosed needing a full-blown hip replacement. Wow. I went to UH. I went to our healthcare system, and they're like, nope, you need a full-blown replacement, metal on metal. And Shannon's like, you're too young for that. Like, you'll have to get 2 more. This doesn't make sense. So she started doing research. Long story short, she found a doctor in Montreal, which is where I'm from. And this doctor was doing a novel surgery, but they're doing it in Germany, Italy. And she put my name in a hat. And it's a ceramic on ceramic resurfacing. So they chop the bone. They don't chop the bone off. You get to keep your hip bone. They just wrap it in ceramic. You don't have to go under for the surgery, and it's good for life. And I saved the taxpayer $160,000, I like to tell people, because the surgery, it was private. I had to pay, but I got $5,000 back from the government, so it cost me just over $10,000. A hip surgery normally costs the taxpayer $60,000. I would have done 3, hence I saved the taxpayer. But here's the moral of the story. Me being Justin, you need this? Okay, sure. I just would have said yes, and I would have chopped my hip off at 33. Because I had my wife, and because she did the research, she really found the right person to help me. And now I refer him out to so many people. And sure, I happen to be in the real estate industry, but I think what you're doing here, what we try to do with our mastermind series, is create communities of people so that those referrals become organic. That it's just, you know, you're at your friend's house and somebody says that, hey, I need a hip replacement. Well, guess what? Send me a text and I'll give you the name now, right? You all know that I know that guy. It's the same thing in the real estate space, whether you're looking to buy a new home, for example. One massive mistake people make is going direct to the builder. They don't even know that they should have a buyer agent, because the agent working for that builder and the builder themselves are representing the builder. Nobody's advocating for you. People think they're going to save money going direct to the builder. Absolutely not. They build the real estate fee into the price of the home. They assume they're going to pay us. So they don't pass it on to you. They pocket the money. I know this because we represent a lot of builders in a lot of different capacities, right? So going back to that point of, okay, let's zoom out and say, is now the right time to buy? It's going to be one of 3 answers. Yes, no, maybe. And we're not here to convince people to buy homes. We're here to help people when they say, yes, I want to buy a home, and dig in deeper to the questions that they don't even know that they have. And I think that's the crux of it, is really making sure that you're solvent on your strategy, working with people that maybe have done what you're trying to do, and finding out the questions you don't even know you have yet. And not being afraid to kind of put your ego aside and really take a harder look at what you're trying to accomplish, and look for people that can help you, rather than feel like you're by yourself in one of the biggest decisions you're ever going to make, right?
Big time. Because there are people that are still buying. There are people now that are still getting to market for the first time. There are lots of tools and incentives and programs in place that can allow you to do that. But it's being intentional about it. It's having a plan. It's talking to people who are advocating for you in your best interests, and then making wise decisions from there.
Yeah, in the new home space specifically. So like, you may call around, and every builder right now will probably give you some free upgrades. They'll maybe buy down your mortgage rate by 2%. But do you know how far they're willing to go based on what other people are offering? I can tell you very big builders in London, I know exactly how many units they're selling a month, and it is not good. What is good is a lot of those people are hungry for deals and keeping their trades busy. And you can get super creative here if you're willing to work with them and you know how to speak the same language, right? So, and I think being solvent on the strategy and transparent with your people in terms of like, at the end of the day, it's their decision, helping them understand the pros and cons. Same from a lawyer's perspective, and you can speak more eloquently on this topic. Your idea is risk mitigation, right? Like, here's the pro, here's the con, high risk, medium risk, low risk. Where do you fall in the gamut? And this is likely what will happen if you go down these 3 paths, right? And that's why we like what we do is we're not good at a million different things. We try to stay very good at market data and market intelligence and knowing the market. And I do think that role of an agent's changed dramatically. You have to know the market better than you ever did before. Marketing, for sure, on the seller side is a completely different animal. Like, you borderline have to be a mini digital agency these days to sell a property effectively. You can hire somebody that's going to shoot it with your iPhone, but you may leave $60,000 to $100,000 on the table. I've seen it over and over. And then the highest value an agent can bring, without a doubt, is negotiation. We track it on our deals. We can have a 1% to 2% impact on the sale price of a property in either direction.
Wild.
Simply through strategic negotiation. And that's the fun part of our job if you treat it like a craft versus what people think it's selling sunset, and it's more about Instagram photos and podcasts than it is actually being a craftsman at what you do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's so easy when you talk about those exchanges for people to think of sales. And it's sales and you're selling, you're trying to sell. But at the end of the day, a good lawyer or real estate agent, mortgage agent, at the end of the day, we're trying to teach. We want to have the heart of a teacher to equip people to make their decisions and advocate for them. So if that comes to negotiation, if that comes to being wise and what price you list the house for, all those different things, it goes a long way for sure.
Yeah, actually on the lending side, I want somebody to do my homework for me. So if I have a good accountant, I want him to tell me tax strategy. That's what I'm paying you for.
Yeah.
Right. If I have a good lawyer, I want him to be like, hey man, like, did you ever think of separating your businesses in this capacity and like my corporate structure, right? Like, I want you to come to me and give me suggestions because that's what you're good at. I don't want to take 10,000 hours to learn what you've learned. Yeah. And I think that's also where we became islands unto ourselves over the last 20 years. And maybe it's because of, digital smartphones and we were talking about the family unit not being as cohesive over the last 20, 30 years as it was previously. But I do feel like I'm seeing a huge return to community, and I'm seeing almost more specialization than I ever did before, where I find we did go through a period of time where everybody was a generalist, right? And now people are getting very niche down as to what they're good at. And on the lender side, like, it's great that I can get the lowest rate possible. Sure. But like, what if I'm going to flip that property and sell it? Like, what are my penalties going to be? If I'm telling you my strategy, go out and find my options. And you come back to me with a B lender that's a higher interest rate, but it's a more flexible product. Yeah. I don't have that relationship. I'm paying for access to your network and your knowledge, essentially.
Exactly,
right?
exactly. And that's one of the conversations that I have with a lot of clients, where a lot of them are saying, what's the lowest interest rate? What's the lowest interest rate? Because that's the number one question, because as though that is the number one factor that determines whether it's the right mortgage for them. When oftentimes it comes down is, what's your situation? What do you want? Or who do you want to be working with as well? It's like oftentimes the difference between a mortgage agent and a typical lender financial institution is that as a mortgage agent, we run our own business, much like you. You know what I mean? It is in our best interest to make sure that every single person we interact with is happy, is served, and is further ahead. And that's the only way that we all win in this entire thing. And so it's great to be able to have those conversations and do that up.
Yeah, and for the business owners watching this, I think, I don't care what business you're in, if you're a tech startup, if fitness business, real estate, mortgage, whatever. If you try to compete from a brand perspective with the large brands, you're probably going to lose. I know personal brand is really important. Obviously, we're doing this, so we put effort into it. I would even say over the next 12 to 24 months, we are leaning more into customer service and actual delivery of customer service, because there's such a lack of it, that there's a huge opportunity for people like yourself to make sure that you're getting a 5-star review every single time you work with a client, because we simply don't have the budgets to compete with the Amazons of the world and the brands that are going to win on just having more advertising out there. But we will win on the community side of things. If I attract somebody today that doesn't know me deliver on my promise, and they become my advocate, I think that is so powerful, and people should be spending more time on delivery on the customer service side than the branding, because I think branding is such a ubiquitous term these days. Everybody's doing it. Yeah. I'm trying to think ahead and say, okay, we've done a really good job of branding over the last 10 years. Let's make sure we're stepping it up on the customer service side. Yeah, love it. Awesome.
So for someone that's going out looking for their first place, what are some common pitfalls that they can avoid? What are things that you see that people do wrong? And you've touched on a bunch of them already in a little bit, but are there any others where you're just like, hey, don't do this. This happens, this will be a disaster. Or maybe this might not work out the way you want it to.
Yeah, I think most of the mistakes I've seen is usually paralysis by analysis. That's one of the biggest ones, where there's so many options out there, you make no decision. And then you just keep waiting. I'm going to wait for the market to drop. It dropped a year and a half ago, right? And, I'm going to wait for the peak of the market to sell, and they wait, and then the market peaks, and then it drops, and they miss it, right? I've never met anybody that's timed the market. I also think taking advice from too many people is a problem, right? I've seen so many situations where people will play professional because they sold a house once and they did it in a different market, or they know a guy that works for a builder. Here, case study. I like case studies because they're real. A farmer called me, nice house, 77-acre property, and on paper it's probably worth $2 million. And I told him, I said, yeah, it's a good area. You're just outside the urban growth boundary. I think a developer will probably buy this. I think I can, if you get 2.122, take your money and run. I got 2.25 immediately off market. I could have told them to just take it and run, but something didn't sit right. I'm like, we didn't even really market it. And I said, I think if you guys trust me, give me another 30 days. Let me see what else I can do for you. I went out there, shopped it around. I got an offer of $3 million. And I was like, now take your money and run, right? Because what I did was I created a situation between somebody else who hadn't seen it and that person, and they got really excited. Here's the problem. They didn't take it because their son works for a builder out in Kitchener. And then he heard about it, and he's like, well, if you do the development yourself, it's worth $6 million. And so they countered it at $6 million. And this was $55,000 plus an acre when farmland sells for 35 and change-ish. And I sat down with him. I was like, hey, I'll walk you through that. No problem. Like, we got planners. Like, we'll talk to the municipal council. This is going to probably take 3 to 5 years and probably $150,000 to $250,000 for a maybe. And you got to make sure that you have the connections to actually get it pushed through at council. As long as you're okay with that time frame, we can support you and kind of go down that path. Now, how it's going to pan out, I don't know, because now we're at a place where the cities are grasping for development. The new devs dropped off the face of the earth. They're not getting the tax credits. Cities want to roll out more land because they want more development. So, like, it may work out in their favor because the city called us and was like, hey, that land that you wanted to develop, like, we want to talk. So roll the dice. It could be a great positive. But if it doesn't, they've just wasted 2 years because they knew somebody who worked for somebody in a different market and didn't have the metrics of the market that we were actually working in, right? Yeah. So you extrapolate that case study to any situation, go to a home inspection with a first-time home buyer, and the girlfriend's dad comes in, and all of a sudden he's an environmental specialist, and the whole house is going to collapse when you have a professional inspector there that can tell you what's wrong with the house and what it takes to fix it. And I've seen people miss opportunities because of something that was blown way out of proportion by somebody that didn't actually understand it, right?
Yeah. Awesome. Great. Thanks, Justin.
Kudos to you for putting on the events too, right? Like, I know it's important to really get out there and connect with your community. A lot of times people hide behind email and social media, and I think you've done a great job making an effort to connect with people. You've shown up at the office at our team meetings, at our events. For anybody that is here or watching this, if you see this before Saturday, which you probably won't, we're hosting a private mastermind in Grand Bend. We don't advertise them publicly. It's at a $2.2 million lakefront property. We have the in-home chef, 2 live podcasts, and a fly fishing guide. So being connected with Zach gets you connected to stuff like that, where we don't invite the public, but because you're connected with Zach, you can send me a DM on Instagram, and I'll send you the details if you guys want to come to that.
Awesome. Great. Justin, thank you so much for your time.
No problem,
Cheers.
Brother.
Awesome.
Thank you.